So once I started to understand that aspect of it, I was like, oh yeah, how come I don't have control over my data? That's true. And how come that doesn't exist? Apple talks about privacy, but at the end of the day, they still own your data. And I cannot just take my data from Apple and go. Why not? Why couldn't I not do that? And it's true. I was surprised. I'm like, oh, it's true. Nobody does that. And I'm like, oh yeah, we should definitely do it then. And so for me, that was just kind of a haha moment. I mean, like, yeah. And I thought coming here was going to take 5 to 10 years for us to get somewhere, frankly, just looking at the market.
Yeah.
But after what happened with COVID, it's clear
Right.
that the market has jumped. Like people, they need to have access of their stuff on their phone. They need to be able to do things on their phone. And for me, that's one aspect of it that's attracting. What's even more attracting is the fact we're making everything, not yet, but like everything is going to be open source. Everything's going to be open. Like what I call open banking, where we want, you're going to have a wallet. Even if you don't have a bank, you can get a wallet with us, not yet, soon it's coming out. We're designing it as we speak. But this type of thing is very attractive to me. We're creating an app that's not just for me in San Francisco, because I'm a tech guy. It's actually the ultimate goal is because you're in the middle, you're in a refugee camp and you have to leave. You should have that identity piece becomes very, very key to you, because that's really your life at that point. And when it's attached to money, attached to other things, it's even more useful now. You don't have to lose all the money you left maybe behind the bank because the countries devaluated the whole currency, right? And that, for me, that's another aspect of GlobaliD that I really find fascinating.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the GlobaliD podcast. I'm Alec, and I will be your host today. Our fearless leader, Greg Kidd, is traveling in Europe right now, working closely with our engineering team over there, as well as some ecosystem partners. So we have a special edition of the podcast for you today. So let's get right into it. When people think about GlobaliD, they naturally, you think about the digital identity component, self-sovereign identity, this idea that people should own their identity and own their data, which is a core value for us at the company. But there's also the messaging component, the messaging and social component, as well as the digital wallet component. Those three layers for us is something that we internally like to call the sovereignty stack, which is basically your ability to have ownership over your identity and data, ownership over your communications and trusted interactions, as well as ownership over your money, your assets, and your payments. So those are three main core components of the GlobaliD platform, which is great. But now tying all of that together and delivering to the user a seamless and cohesive experience. Now that's another story. And it's a bit of a challenge, but luckily today we have our resident design guru, Antoine, VP of design here at GlobaliD, to walk us through how we're taking on that challenge, as well as maybe giving a little bit of a teaser as to where things might go in the future, because obviously these are still the early innings for us, I think, in a long and exciting journey. So I'll pass it on to you, Antoine. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your story as a designer, how you ended up at GlobaliD?
Sure. So I'm Antoine, originally born and raised in France, moved to Canada when I was 21, I believe. I wanted to learn English because my English sucked. It's still not great, but at least you can understand me somewhat. But so I moved there, worked for a small agency. I was a web designer at the time, became a creative director. It was actually very interesting. That's why I learned to do, we did e-learning at the time in 2002, which was not a thing people did in 2002. And we actually did it for Xerox North America. It went very well. That's why I've learned that as a designer, I could have a huge impact. Like I was able on my own to create an entire e-learning platform for a big company. Sure, working with lots of engineers, but I was a sole designer at the time. So for me, it was very interesting to see the impact I could have as a designer. And after that, I did that for 5 years. That's where I learned my craft really. And after that, I got married, and we decided to move to Europe. So we moved to England, actually, to London. And I worked for a few gigs there. Again, that's when I realized how much the skill of a designer was looked for. And I didn't know that before I left my little place in Canada. When I moved to London, a much bigger city, people were willing to pay me actual money to do my job. I'm like, oh, really? So I ended up working for National Geographic, working for some big agency as well. And at some point, I wanted to get more of a steady job. So I worked for an investment bank, HSBC Investment, and which sounds very odd, but I wanted to see what it was like. Because I worked in an agency for, at that time, 6 years, worked on National Geographic for a few months. It was fun. I wasn't learning things, I was just doing fun stuff. And when it comes to investment and money, I had no idea. So I may as well learn it and go inside of it. So I used to have to wear a suit, which didn't last very long. After 2 weeks, I took it off. But I got in trouble. But they understood I didn't need to meet, investors and people like that. I was there to do something else. But so what I learned as well after a year there was that it's very hard to change things from the inside. So
Right.
after a year at HSBC, we're just like, okay, I'm not going to change things. It's just too hard to change people's mind. Or even when you change people's mind, they agree with it. They just cannot do it because of the technology behind it.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, so I guess that's not going to work out. And then at the time, we were very flexible. So we decided, where should we move? And as a designer, where should you move to find an interesting job? And Silicon Valley, San Francisco, for me, is something as a kid, you don't even think about it. You don't even know what it is as a French guy. But we just decided to move. So we moved to San Francisco. There was 2007, I believe. I forget. Talked to a lot of people. Found a couple of jobs. One for a startup in Mountain View that had to do with finance. And it was actually called TrialPay, which got bought up by Visa, I believe, like 5-6 years after I left. So that was my first encounter with the startup life, which was very similar to what I did in agency. Actually, it was just instead of working on one thing once a month, you work on the same thing for a whole year, which for me was kind of interesting and nice. So I love the pace. The pace was very similar to working in agency, and it was fun to work on one problem at a time. So that was very interesting. After that, I moved again. We moved to New York, East Coast, then moved again back to San Francisco, working for an agency that a guy I met actually at my first startup. So I was kind of at that point, I became kind of the UX director, whatever you want to call it. I was in charge of design for that agency. So we did branding, we did everything, a lot of marketing as well. Did that for 5 years. And that's my first client. I don't know if it was my first client. One of my first clients was Greg in 2011 or 2010. I forget. Soon after I moved back to San Francisco. And I never met him before. We just met, and he's just explaining his project, which very, I'm like, what are you trying to do? And at the time, what they were doing with 3Taps was trying to make Craigslist more useful.
Right.
At the time, I don't know if you remember Craigslist, but if you were looking for an apartment, like where's the apartment? You have to, it's just a list of links, just no map, nothing at all. And so they created an API that would allow us to play with data from Craigslist. So we created a beautiful map so you could zoom in. What you see everywhere nowadays, but at the time in 2011, 2012, it was not a thing. And it was called Craigers actually. And I believe he got sued for that. So there was,
yes. There's a lawsuit. Greg likes to talk about it.
Yeah. So, but for me, it was just interesting to meet someone like him. It was the first time in a long time where I met someone where I wasn't sure what he was talking about. Like I had to really pay attention because he was talking about topics I didn't know. He was talking about Bitcoin. And I was like, what's Bitcoin? Like 2011. I was not. So I looked it up, obviously. But that's how I met Greg, and I realized Greg was one of those guys that is he's a pioneer. He thinks about things way ahead. I thought as a designer, I thought ahead, but I don't think ahead like he does. I make reality happen. He tries to bring the future to today, and that's why it's very interesting when you meet someone like that. So I met him, and we worked on a couple of projects. And I think the last project I worked on with him in 2014 or 15 was actually a wallet, like a crypto wallet on the web, and where you could do a lot of things with it. Actually, something we're trying to build now again with a GlobaliD. But after that, I left the agency after 5 years, and I went to actually a company called Chewy, which at the time I had no idea what it was. actually, I thought it was a scam at first for their website. If you look at their website in 2015, I didn't trust it. I would never put a credit card in it. But then I met the founders and I think the CEO at the time, and it was amazing. Like they were all about customer support, all about the customer, right? Which as a designer, as a UX guy, that's what you care about. You want to make the life of people easier. And those guys they didn't do it digitally, but they did it in real life. So if you call them on the phone even today, like Chewy is the best customer service I've ever seen, frankly. And that really appealed to me because I was tasked to bring that to the digital world, right? And they had nothing at the time. Their website was, I shouldn't say that, but like it wasn't great, let's just say. So it was a very interesting experience because there was Series B or C at the time, so they were making money. Growth was pretty impressive. It was $200 million a year, I believe, when I joined. And then, so my first task was just to recreate the website, create an app for them. And I was alone at first, and we hired a couple of designers, and we hired a bunch of designers, a lot of designers, just on the branding marketing side. So I got to build up teams, right? So that was the first time I had teams before, but never built big teams. And this one was even more specific, where we opened an office in Boston to get more UX designers. So I moved to Boston to lead that team there. And at the end, I had about like 40, 50 people. I had like UX researchers, UX designers, as well as what I call UX engineers, like the guys in charge of the design system, the one that code it. They're the one, they were part of my team as well. And and it was very interesting to see how you can take a company from a Series B or C to going public, because I went up all the way through that, right? It was, for me, it's the first time I went through the whole process. And as a designer, it was very interesting because I had an impact on everything. I was part of almost every conversation, right? And I never had that much of an impact at what has become now a huge company. And it was nice. And you meet a lot of great people because, Chewy is an attractive brand and lots of talented people want to work there. So met a lot of great people there, and some I brought at GlobaliD, actually.
James, right?
You got James, AJ, Alvaro. We have a few. Michelle, Jesse. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
There's a whole Chewy squad here. Nice.
Correct. It's but that's one thing. That's one thing that was great there. Not only the company was interesting, but the people who wanted to work for them were, they love dogs, is one thing, but like they cared, and when you care about the company and the brand, that makes a whole of a difference. And it doesn't matter which company it is, right? You have to care. You have to have a sense of purpose, and well, that Chewy was very good. And GlobaliD for me was even more interesting than Chewy. That's why I left Chewy, is because when I never lost contact with Greg and Mitch, obviously. So I always kept contact, see what they were doing. I think I even did the first GlobaliD logo one time, like in 2015. But I was, e-commerce is interesting, but it gets so far. So I was looking for something more interesting. And GlobaliD for me doesn't get more interesting than trying to change the way the world functions, right? That's what we're trying to do right here. It's like, we're not waiting for the Web 3.0 to be a thing. We're building the Web 3.0 pretty much through an app, sure. And ultimately, we want the Web 3.0 to be a thing across the world, but who knows how long it's going to take? We don't have control over that, but we have control over GlobaliD. So at least, if you want to step into the future, GlobaliD is going to be the right solution. And right now, that's what we're trying to build.
Let me ask you about that. One of my takeaways listening to your story is that one, you've lived in a lot of different places.
Yes.
You've worked at a lot of different places, from a bank to an agency to a tech startup. Chewy is great, by the way. We recently got my dad a dog for Christmas, and I ordered a bunch of stuff from Chewy. What in a lot of ways, like these are sort of known, I guess, business models, like you said about Chewy and e-commerce. What was like your initial impression when you heard about GlobaliD, right? Because, this is like a completely sort of new kind of framework, right? Like what was your take initially?
It was a very much the same take I had when I first met Greg, in a way, where I was like, what are we trying to do? Like the whole idea of SSI at the time, I was not familiar with it. I'm like, what do you mean SSI? And I looked into it. Okay, what it really means is user control of your data. Like SSI is just a very complicated term for people, for engineers and geeks like us that understand it, but I don't think it's friendly enough for others. So once I started to understand that aspect of it, I was like, oh yeah, how come I don't have control over my data? That's true. And how come that doesn't exist? Apple talks about privacy, but at the end of the day, they still own your data. And I cannot just take my data from Apple and go. Why not? Why could I not do that? And it's true. I was surprised. I'm like, oh, it's true. Nobody does that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, we should definitely do it then. And so for me, that was just kind of a haha moment. I mean, like, yeah. And I thought coming here was going to take 5 to 10 years for us to get somewhere, frankly, just looking at the market.
Yeah.
But after what happened with COVID, it's
Right.
clear that the market has jumped. Like people, they need to have access of their stuff on their phone. They need to be able to do things on their phone. And for me, that's one aspect of it that's attracting. What's even more attracting is the fact we're making everything, not yet, but like everything is going to be open source. Everything's going to be open. Like we, what I call open banking, where we want, you're going to have a wallet. Even if you don't have a bank, you can get a wallet with us. Not yet. Soon it's coming out. We're designing it as we speak. But this type of thing is very attractive to me. We're creating an app that's not just for me in San Francisco, because I'm a tech guy. It's actually the ultimate goal is because you're in the middle, you're in a refugee camp and you have to leave. You should have that identity piece becomes very, very key to you, because that's really your life at that point. And when it's attached to money, attached to other things, it's even more useful now. You don't have to lose all the money you left maybe behind the bank because the countries devaluated the whole currency, right? And that for me, that's another aspect of GlobaliD that I really find fascinating. And sure, it's not just GlobaliD. We're not the one building it. We're using Uphold as a partner, for example. But that's also what I like about GlobaliD. Like Uphold is one partner. Eventually, we could partner with other type of banking and institutions or other crypto people. And that's what I like about what we're trying to build there. It's really identity is the start of what you can do. And we're giving you we're trying to give everyone access to that. That's a lofty goal, and who doesn't want to be part of that?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, right? I think the unique thing about GlobaliD is because identity is so fundamental to so many things. It can actually be, such a grand and big vision that touches a lot of things. And I think for us, one of the exciting things is that just how much progress we've made in the last year on the product side of things, right? I mean, the self-sovereign identity that exists now. The communications platform that's working. We use it every day. The digital wallet is live. You can get money, you can make payments, exchange, you can tip. And
you can
obviously
even get rewards. You can even get rewards if you're a lucky guy like me.
Oh, the XRP card. Look at you showing off. That's a nice little flex. But yeah, coming soon, by the way. Yeah, so obviously you had a big hand to play in a lot of that, but what are you sort of working on now that really excites you?
Sure. So there's two things when it comes to my job right now. Is one, getting the team organized, and how do we scale the team in the future, right? So that's one aspect of it. And then, so that can be exciting on its own, but I don't think it's exciting for other people. But what's more exciting is on the design side, what we're trying to do, right? So one big thing that's coming in, hopefully Q3, is going to be, because right now we added a lot of features, like everything you said. But when we first created the app, we didn't think we're going to have that much. I suppose at least not every other feature we have. So we got to the point now where, like, okay, we have a lot of things. How do we organize it in such a way that I can use it, or my mom can use it, because we're not just a messaging app. Like my mom can use WhatsApp, but that's what they do, or Signal for that matter. But like Facebook, she's not a fan, too much happening, right? And we're getting to the point where we have that group functionality, for example, and that group functionality alone is a lot of functionality, right? And so how do we create an interface that, yes, gives me access to my identity, so it's clear, gives me access to money, and gives me access to like whatever I do on social media. And so what actually I can share, it's not final, we're still working on it, but I can share some of the stuff.
Yeah, we love that.
Working on just wireframes, but you get the idea. So the idea is what happens if you take our app and make it about identity, first of all. Like we have an identity tab now, but like limit the other choices. Like really when we say what you said earlier, literally what you said earlier, is that we are about three things: identity, giving you access to money, and giving you access to people. So what we call social. Bear in mind, that hasn't gone through copywriting. That's not copywriting, so don't take it for as such. But the goal is like give me access to everything, but don't overwhelm me with too much, right? And that was a struggle. Like, well, no, it is a bit of a struggle, and we're getting to a solution like this, which for me is a lot clearer already. And like I was just talking to a designer who's working on the UI piece of it, and it might simplify even more. So for me, I feel a lot better already if we can move towards that type of world where it doesn't matter who you are, you should be able to use GlobaliD, right? And today you can, it's not as user-friendly as we want it to be. And we all know that. And that's the next goal for us, making that very user-friendly and making usable. At the end of the day, the app needs to be seamless, right? It should just be either an extension of what you do every day, and maybe you only use GlobaliD for certain things, right? You don't have to use GlobaliD for everything, but you can, right? It depends on users. If you really want to control your data and it's all encrypted, like it's up to you. You don't have to, but you should. Of course, I'm biased, but like at least you have the option now if you want to do it, right? At least, frankly, one big thing I'm looking forward to is like now we're working on like COVID credentials, like you can have your COVID card on your phone now. So why not, And so things like that, for me, that's the other thing that's a big piece of identity, what we call identity, is this idea of credentials, right? Like I've got a driver license, I always carry it with me, but why is it not in my phone?
Right.
And
but by the way, that the COVID credential thing where you can sort of take a snap of your actual vaccine card and store it in GlobaliD, right? And you'll be able to use that as proof of vaccination. And that's in production already, I think, right?
It is, I've got it. Yeah, I've got it there. So what I was just showing you here, for example, that's just the next version where I wanted to look like, at least in the US, in Europe is different, Asia is different. And eventually, right now it's all manual because we need every government in the world to agree to those things. That's the whole point of like of GlobaliD. But for now, we're gonna let you do it yourself at least. At least you have the option, right? And I think Clear does it. I just saw Clear. They do a good job actually. And so it's becoming a thing. People are starting to use their phone to do other things. And for me, that's where GlobaliD becomes the right app for you to use because it's all encrypted and because you have control. The biggest thing for me is the fact, the biggest thing for me is the fact you have control over it, right? And right now it's, like you said earlier, we're still at the beginning of it. Like, you can access a poll, for example, using only GlobaliD, which I love personally because I hate remembering password. I love just scanning and I'm in. It's safer. I don't have to remember a password and I don't have to put a 4-6 digit because I get a text from whatever. I love that type of solution. But so that's, for me, that's where we're going, and that's a big thing in Q3 that's going to be coming. This what we call the credential store. So you'll be able to store some physical things into your phone, sure, but also verify some piece of credential, so you can get an account with a pool, for example, or get a roommate with the Roomie app, which is one of our partners. And eventually, of course, the goal is to extend that to as many people as we want. Anybody who cares about data privacy, I think, should be using GlobaliD. And that should be a lot of people, right? A lot of people talk about it, but I don't see that much action. But I see a lot more talk. I don't know if you noticed, but the past year, I see Apple doing it now. I have beautiful landing page I just saw about Apple privacy. It's well done. It's well done. And it's nice to see people like that starting to care. I still think it's too much its own silo. I'm an Apple user, I like it. But it's still a silo, right? So for me, that's the difference between us and everybody else. It's open. And it means also that you don't have to use GlobaliD in the future. You could start using GlobaliD and switch to a competitor. That's fine. We want to create the best experience for the users. If you find something better, it's fair. It's fair.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, ultimately the power is with the user, right?
Exactly. That's literally what we live by. So
yeah. I remember the first year you were at the company, you came in and you made a lot of sweeping changes. We got a new logo, everything started to look nice, a lot more cohesive.
Nice, sir.
Yeah. And obviously we mentioned in the last year we made a huge amount of progress on the product front. In your sort of ideal world, like if we were to fast forward 1 year, and from your perspective as a designer, where would you like to be? What would you like to be working on at the time? Where would you like to see us?
I mean, I want to see us where there's a few things. One is I can connect to more than just one, like right now you can connect to a port, for example. I want to be able to connect to my bank. I want to be able to connect to my Coinbase. I want to be able to connect to, and I think we can do some of those, not all of those. But some of those are doable. When it comes to credential and identity, I want to be able to go to the store and pay and get my bottle of champagne and check all of that with my global ID, right? And all it requires is on the merchant to agree to use it, right? And I will go to my local merchant and I will lobby them to use it. But for me, that's those two. After that is the social aspect of it. And I think the social aspect of it is probably going to be the most, what most people are going to be like attracted to, because it's useful. You can post content, you can, I mean, it's social media pretty much, right? Like we're creating not all in one social media, but you're going to be able to, if you want to create a blog post, you'll be able to create a blog post on GlobaliD. Again, owning your data. You want to post like you post on Twitter, you'll be able to do that. Actually, you'll be able to post on Twitter from GlobaliD eventually, right? So that aspect of it's going to get huge. And the aspect of groups, communities aspect of it, for me, that's a big one. And when you link communities to money, like what we're doing with XRP Army, right? It gets even more interesting. You know, when I talk to friends in France who don't really understand GlobaliD, they understand the concept of owning your data. When I talk to them about like, oh, you know, if you create a group, you'll be able to create your own reward card, and you can. And they get very excited about that, because some of them, you know, they have their own, they create their own school, they try to raise money, and they're like, oh my God, if we could get that card, I could raise more money more easily. But they see the value in it without even understanding the whole idea of SSI, without understanding everything we do. But they understand the end game. They're like, oh my God, that sounds so useful. And it is. It is. I mean, we talk to schools, we talk to a lot of different players right now. So I think in the next year, that aspect of our business that really we don't really talk about much right now, it's going to get even bigger than the identity piece. The identity piece is going to enable those things, but the actual use case, I think you use GlobaliD even more because of that. Right. And depending who you are, I'm sure not every single Instagram person is going to come to us. That's not the goal either. But if you're looking for, if you don't want to get trolled, if you don't want to get, like, you don't want fake users on your feed, GlobaliD gives you that. Right. It's up to you. You can allow fake users as well, but who wants that? You know, and sure, like, you know, social media companies don't have an incentive to clean that up because they will lose millions of users overnight. We don't have that problem because we're lucky that, you know, we work for a company that's well funded, and we're working for the user right now. We don't have a, it's rare, frankly. I never worked for that type of company where I can really, it's not taking the time because we're always moving fast and rushing, but at least we're taking the time to try to build something that's going to be useful to everyone. And that's very neat. And I'd be very happy. I'm hoping in a year from now, unbanked people can use us. Actually, before that, what am I saying? Before the end of the year, I want that to happen, right? Like the non-custodial wallet piece, which should be ready pretty soon, next couple of months. That's a big piece for me as well. After that, other people are trying to do it too, right? I believe Cash is trying to do it. Other people, Square maybe. It's exciting for me because we are building it and we're giving you access to so many other things. That's the aspect of GlobaliD that's very attractive. And of course, it's let's see what happens. We don't know what happens, but for me, I'm very excited just to get that card. Like I was showing, I'm showing off, but like it's nice to be like, I'm paying. I went to McDonald's yesterday and I used it just to test it, but and it worked, and I got some reward in XRP. How cool is that? So like,
very
you know,
cool.
That's very interesting. That's just the first group, literally first group we're creating. So like after that, it's gonna get crazy.
Well, I love that you brought up the financial inclusion part as well. And just, you know, I would say broadly, we sort of think of our mission as being able to give everyone, if they want one, an identity, right, and a wallet and the ability to communicate. And you know, with something like Instagram, I don't think Instagram's going away. I use Instagram. You know, that's going to be useful, but you know, if you are successfully using Instagram, you have a good experience there, you've built the following. I think what you said about GlobaliD is that it can be a complement to that, you know, where you have an ecosystem that you have control over, that you can moderate and manage and have those building blocks of payments and communications and trusted engagements, right? So
I don't use Instagram enough, but like I know YouTube does now, I don't know Twitter does now, but can you do live events on Instagram now? I guess they use Facebook probably for that stuff.
Oh yeah, people do they do like live streams on Instagram. I'm not sure what it's called on it. I mean, yeah, I feel like everyone has sort of something like that right now.
But these days, yeah, that's slowly becoming, if you don't have it, it's like, why not? Like 10 years ago, that was not a
Yeah.
thing, so that's pretty impressive.
I mean, that's sort of the funny thing, I think, where we're at with everything is that all the platforms are looking more and more like all the other platforms, right?
Yeah,
To a
yeah,
certain
they just
degree.
copy each other. Yeah, because
Yeah,
they see that feature, oh, we need to add that feature.
right.
And they just, which it's not the way to build a good product, frankly. You should like, why are you building this and what are you trying to achieve? What's your purpose there? But they make a lot of money, so it's hard to go against that incentive. But for me, I think what I'm seeing more and more is I think the younger generation. I don't know about my parents, but like I know my generation and younger, we care about privacy and data.
Right.
And doesn't mean we do something about it, because from what I read, people say they care, but at the end of the day, they don't use the tool they could be using. But I think that's not because people don't want to, but it needs to be practical.
Yeah.
Like if it's not practical, yeah, I'm not going to use it. Sorry. Like I know I'll get trolled on Twitter, but fine. It's okay. But so I think that's changing though.
I mean, I've been writing in this space for quite a while. We've been talking about privacy, for years and years and years, right? But I think it's to your point. I don't think people have been given a good alternative option,
No.
right? So
What
there
is
is the opportunity.
they have alternative. It's just too complicated, right?
Yeah.
Like you can like even in the crypto space, people, like you can save stuff to, I mean, you do it to your hardware, right?
Yeah.
I would never do that personally, even though that's the right thing to do, right? Because then you own it. But I'd rather have an institution own some of it, and I've got the key. They cannot access it. So I feel safe that way. But again, it's not as smart as that being a physical device. But I'm one of those people, I guess. I know I could be better, but I still don't do it.
I will say it's extremely stressful having that and knowing that there's value on it. Every time, well, this is just in crypto in general. Anytime I send any payment for any amount, I get really stressed out. It feels so permanent. There's no one I can call and be like, "Uh-oh, I typed in the wrong number or something."
Oh, yeah. Well, that's where, again, that's where GlobaliD can help as well. Like making sure you send to the right person, you get to double check as well, and you have somebody to reach out to. But yeah, those things are interesting. And what I've learned from the crypto community, people are very, very much into those things. And it's, but we need to please it. I mean, you'll be able to use those things with GlobaliD too. You can today. I mean, I don't know if you are because of where you're located, but I know people are. I'm not one of those people, but for me, that's the same issue with privacy. There are tools out there, they're just too cumbersome. So I do make privacy less cumbersome and actually, and explain what privacy means. Like Greg I forget where he explained it, but like privacy is not about just hiding all the time, and people think of that, we're just hiding all the time. But that's not true. Like right now, you can see me. Sure, I could hide myself, I could stop my video, but when it's a podcast about us, it's not that good. So in real life, you have to show yourself sometime, and that's what you need to be able to do on the digital side of it. But why when I go to Amazon, I've got to share my whole everything about me, when all they need is to know I've got money and I can pay for it. Even the address, technically, they don't need to know. The delivery guy needs to know. That's it, right? So why is all that data like being shared around by everyone? Like it doesn't make sense I mean, it makes sense because they sell that data, but that's what we're trying to stop, right? Like actually not true. I don't mind if you sell my data if I get money out of it, If every time people own my data, I get 10% out of it, I'll take the money. I don't have that choice today. So I think having that choice, I think we'll be surprised what people will allow. It's like, no, it's okay. You can use my data for this. I want the money for it. And we just don't have that option today. So people just take it and sell it and make money out of it. But yeah, what we're trying to do might change a few things if we're successful. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned crypto. Crypto, I think, has definitely been a major driver of that. This idea that you can have these technologies that don't rely on a central operator, right? And so there's a lot of alignment just around the concept of ownership and owning your identity that aligns very well with these other decentralized systems. And in a way, crypto sort of needs a unique identity system that that can get the most out of it.
I mean, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we're running out of time, but why don't you finish that last stop, last thought, and I have a couple quick follow-ups for you.
Sure. No, I was just gonna say, like, ultimately, like, if we're very successful as a company, GlobaliD, we should not exist, right? As we stand. right? Like identity should just be another protocol. The same way DNS is a protocol, the same way HTTPS is a protocol. Your identity should be a protocol. So no matter what device or object you might have connected to internet, or maybe not, you can access it with your identity. So if I connect to a TV or go to the airport, I could literally connect my identity and change the TV settings it's connected to me, right? But that should be across the board. And that's, for me, that's the future. That's not right now. But that's where it should go to be very useful. And then when you're born, you get that, right? Everyone.
Right. And I mean, there's an argument to be made that that will ultimately produce better companies, right? Because if everyone's operating at the interoperable, protocol level, with less friction for users to move around, they need to build real value for
it's safer too. It's safer too. Why, as a company, why do you want to store data? To get hacked? Everybody gets hacked.
Yeah.
Everyone got hacked, Apple included. Everyone got hacked, right? They just hide it. You don't know about it a few years later. But why even host the data? Like, I don't understand that aspect of it. So that's going to change for sure.
Okay. First of all, thank you, for your overview of a lot of things. I just wanted to get a couple quick takes from you.
Sure.
First of all, obviously a lot of volatility in the crypto markets. Now we've learned today that you were quite early on crypto, thanks to Greg, back 2011 when you first learned about it.
See, I didn't understand enough. I just said I didn't buy pizza at the time. I wish I did.
Yeah. Well, you wish you sold the pizza for Bitcoin. That's right.
That's something else. Actually, I wish I did. Anyway, something else. But
yeah. What's your, having learned more about crypto along the way? What's your take on what's going on right now?
I mean, my take is the old system saying bad, bad, bad. Don't look at crypto. And crypto is saying it's not going to change. Like it's another wave. Like that's what happened a few years ago. And if you look what happened, same thing happened, and it's going to go back up. And I know there are some real concern about, how do you call it, the pollution and things like that. I think that's overblown as well. Even though it's true, it's overblown when you compare it to actual industries that pollute. I think that's just used against crypto because that's a negative. And I don't think, even though it's a fair negative, I don't think it's the fairest thing in the world.
It's a worthwhile conversation to have. Let's put it that way.
It totally is, but that's all you hear now, right? They use the narrative just to make it. Like, sure, you're right, but what about Chevron? What about all those guys that pollute every day? I don't hear anything. But it's just insane. But it's a fair. But that's why you're seeing the one that do are a lot more efficient, doing better, and I like that. That's where competition becomes useful in crypto. I think Bitcoin is his own. It's no longer what it was, meaning it's not what it was in 2011, what it was meant to be, to buy pizzas. Right? I think XRP is more for that in the future, but and others. So I think they're here to stay. How are they going to stay? No way I'm doing prediction on crypto.
Well, Goldman Sachs agrees with you, right? They published a report recently that officially stated that crypto and Bitcoin are now in a new investable asset class, right? And so
never too late.
Yeah.
Too late to but no, but which is good for me. That's what when I hear people like, it's the end of crypto. It's people who don't understand crypto, and when you see institutions investing in crypto, it shows that maybe Bitcoin won't go to be like $1 million a coin, but it's here to stay. It's here to stay. And for me, what I'm more interested in is to see the new cryptocurrency and the new innovation that's coming. The smart contracts. For me, that's one thing we're going to be supporting at GlobaliD. Like how do we make, for us, the issue is going to be like, how do we make smart contract easy to use, right? And we're already working on that, right? I mean, we have some cool things coming up soon, actually. So that aspect of it, I think, is going to become even more interesting. And people, I think the crypto and investment is it's still a bit hard to me, but I'm in it because I believe in the projects, right?
Right.
But I mean, I prefer that over stocks, frankly. I don't see people say such a big difference. Is it? It's not that different, not to me anyway. And at least I feel like I understand crypto. At least the one I invested on, I understand what they do more than some of the companies I used to invest in. Although I do have some GameStop.
Well, we could talk about this all day, you and I, as we know. Last one, because I know you're a football fan. We've got the Champions League final on Saturday. between, what was it, Chelsea and Manchester City?
Yeah, City, it's gonna be, it's a soccer game, so you
Yeah.
never know what can happen. But
Well,
City is
disclaimer,
looking strong.
we're recording this on the Thursday before the
Oh,
final, and this will be
yes.
published on Monday. So Antoine, give us your prediction, which will be
So-
stale by the time this comes out.
So if Giroud plays for Chelsea, then Chelsea wins. If otherwise, I'm French. I'm just being extra biased. So I think City is going to win on paper, and watching them the whole year, they're just too good right now. I feel like they're getting better by the end of the year. So I think that they're better, but Chelsea has shown that they can play, so it should be a good game. I think City should take it. Should take it. But I care more about the Euro Cup coming in June, actually.
Well, I mean, I could probably guess your prediction for that, right?
I mean, on paper, to
Viva
be fair,
les
France,
Bleus.
yeah, on paper, we have the best team on paper,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean anything in soccer, in football soccer. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
especially in a
But it's-
tournament style, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, no, but that team is like probably the best team we ever had, like better than 98, better than 2006. But again, it's football. Football is it's a beautiful game for a reason.
all right.
you know?
Well, you heard it here first. If Giroud starts, then Chelsea and France will win. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Antoine, for joining us.
Thanks, Eric.
And
Anytime.
we will see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.
All right.